Welcome to the Fighting on Film podcast, the podcast all about classic and obscure war movies, from the Normandy landings to the days of chivalry and swords. If it's been captured on film, we're going to try and cover it. I'm Robbie of RM Military History.
I'm Matthew Moss of Historical Firearms and the Armourer's Bench.
Hello, welcome back to Fighting on Film. After our week hiatus, we had some gremlins in the system, but we're back to winning ways. This week we welcome Matt back from Las Vegas, and we do our Patreon pick episode. Now, if you're new around here to the show, every month we pitch 4 movies to our fabulous Patreon supporters to vote for. By the time you listen to this, it'll be February, but this month's Patreon pick for January was Ill Met by Moonlight from 1957. But if you want to join the Patreons and get in on the action for yourself, you can do so for as little as £2.50 per month, and you help keep the mics on here at FOF HQ. But before we go into the movie this week, I thought we'd have a brief chat about all of the accolades and nominations being thrown at All Quiet on the Western Front in this year's awards roundup. What do you think about that, Matt?
Well, it's something like, is it 13 or 9 BAFTAs?
9 Oscar nominations, 14 BAFTAs or something.
That's it. And I think it's equaled the record for the most number of BAFTA nominations for a film.
Right.
Ever, which is incredible.
Really
interesting that there were no cast nominations within the Oscar noms. I thought that was interesting. Which the cast was strong, and I thought there were some good performances. But there's lots of the production side that is being recognised, which is I can see where the nominations are coming from for that.
It's been a bit of a backlash, though, isn't there, in Germany? I've been reading about
Apparently so. I read an article this week, and I sent it to you, didn't I, that said that a lot of the German cinema press had found the adaptation to be a little bit too loose with the original source material, because Remarque's book is so lauded, and it's a cultural touchstone for Germany, rightly so. And a lot of them are kind of unhappy with how the material has been adapted, which it's interesting because obviously it's something that I also noticed and you noticed as well, and we both said that it's kind of a shame they didn't just break entirely and go with a different name, and acknowledge the nods to the original source material, because it clearly isn't an adaptation in the classic sense.
Like how Land and Freedom isn't a direct copy of Homage Catalonia by George Orwell, but it borrows heavily from it. But because it doesn't call it that, it gets away with a lot more. Like maybe they should just gone down that route, perhaps. I
think that might have kept some of the German cinema critics happy. I don't know how the film was generally received amongst the German cinema-going, Netflix-viewing public. They might have loved it, which is entirely possible. Critics and audience are separate entities, aren't
they? 100%. Yeah, I think it's interesting. I think it will be interesting to see what it wins. I mean, no doubt the movie is, it's depending what camp you're in. The movie's either a masterpiece or it's, an affront to the book.
But we have to remember that the previous adaptations altered things as well from the original book itself. So we can't be too stringent in holding the book up to the film, or the film to the book rather.
Yeah.
Because there's always artistic license, although admittedly the 2022 film does break a lot more from the book than the previous adaptations do. But it'd be really interesting to see how it does. Definitely.
No, it will. I know it really do. Be interesting to see what happens. And it leans back into our theory of event movies, the war genre becoming event films. Dunkirk got loads of nominations.
That's totally true.
1917 got loads.
Yeah. No, I think you're right. I think there's a definite argument to say that war movies have become event films, especially the successful ones.
Yeah.
I think there's the smaller ones, or the less successful ones definitely kind of fall by the wayside a lot quicker than.
Well, look at how Devotion's been treated over here with its release. Like, it just got shoved on Prime Video with not much fanfare.
Yeah, I don't understand it. I watched it this weekend.
Oh, wow.
And I really enjoyed it. I'm looking forward to covering it. I thought it was a really well-made film. It felt like an old war movie in a lot of ways. and
Right.
it sets the characters up phenomenally well, I think. But we'll talk about that. That's not what this week's episode is about. We'll save that for the devotion episode when we come to
hand.
it. Yeah.
But so let's get into Ill Met by
Before we
Moonlight.
do move on, though, I will say if you haven't listened to our All Quiet on the Western Front review, do go back and take a listen to that, because it's a really interesting discussion around. Because I saw it on a cinema screen, Rob saw it at home, as most people probably did. So it's definitely well worth taking a listen to.
Oh, and there's another little aside before we move on. This week, while the episode last week may have been delayed, our fabulous executive producer Katie's been working behind the scenes, and there now is a search function on the Player app on our website, fightingonfilm.com, where you can now search for movies. So if there's a movie that you wonder if we've done, or something that you might be curious of watching, but you might want to listen to our review first, you can go and search it up there. And now we've done some tinkering, and we're now getting spreadsheets through, things like that. So hopefully going forward, we're going to get all the information that you guys send us in one place. So now we can work off
the suggestions and stuff.
Much easier. So thanks a lot, Katie, for that.
Truly are living in the future now.
We really, really are here at FOF HQ, that the boffins are, that they're going cyber. So back to Ill Met by Moonlight. I said that probably 5 times already. So cast or production, Matt, the floor is yours.
Yeah, so in terms of cast, it's quite a strong cast, and I think everyone in the film brings a lot to it with the material that they've got. Of course, it's led by Dirk Bogarde, who plays Patrick Paddy Lee Firma, or Philadem. A couple of years prior to this, he'd had a great turn in Appointment to London in 1951.
Yeah.
He'd been in They Who Dare and The Sea Shall Not Have Them in 54. He was in Simba in 1955, a very rare British cinema look at the Mau Mau uprising.
Brian Desmond Hurst, this is the Glory director.
Exactly.
Yeah.
We'll definitely have to cover that one, I think.
We will.
The Wind Cannot Read in 58, which is an interesting one about the Far East. It's a bit of a romance where he falls in love with a training instructor who trains people to interrogate Japanese prisoners.
Okay.
Interesting one.
He's definitely in his peak, isn't he, this era? So peak Bogarde. Yeah.
Throughout the 50s, does lots of great stuff. Password is Courage, HMS Defiant in 62, King and Country in 64, Oh What a Lovely War in 69, and of course, A Bridge Too Far, which we've covered on the podcast a couple of times, in 1977 is his last war movie role. Of course, when we cover cast, we only really discuss the war movie roles, because if we went into all the other amazing films that Dirk was in, we'd be here for quite a while.
Exactly.
Then we have Marius Goring, who plays Major General Heinrich Creep, or is it Crepe? Crepe? I think it's Crepe.
I've heard people say Crepe. There's loads of different pronunciations.
I know, yeah. I can't remember how they pronounce it in the film. They just call him the General a lot of the time, don't they?
Crepe, I think they say a lot.
Yeah. So he was in another Powell and Pressburger film in 1939 called The Spy in Black, which is one of those early war noir movies with a almost fantastical plot. Matter of Life and Death in 1946. He was in Odette in 1950, about Odette Sampson. I Was Monty's Double in 58. The Angry Hills a year later. Up from the Beach in 1965. And then his last war movie role was Zeppelin with Michael York in 1971. David Oxley plays Captain William Stanley, or Billy Moss. And his probably best known war movie role is Yesterday's Enemy in 1959, which we've already covered on the podcast. Dimitri Andreas plays Nico Emeris. Cyril Cusack plays Captain Sandy Rendell, who's a bit of an eccentric character in the film. He was in Soldiers 3 in 1951, The Man Who Never Was in 56, The Spy Who Came In From the Cold, and he was also the gunsmith in the 1973 Day of the Jackal as well, which is
very nice,
a classic. Lawrence Payne played Manoli, and his credits include A Matter of Life and Death as well, and the court martial of Major Keller. Wolfe Morris played George, and he was in Camp on Blood Island in 1958 and Yesterday's Enemy in 1959. and The Message in 1976. Michael Gough played Andoni Zoudakis, and his roles include Reach for the Sky in 1956 with Kenneth More, Top Secret in 1984 with Val Kilmer.
We got to do that at one point.
I know, yeah.
It is good.
We probably do.
Comedy month.
War movie spoof month, yeah, definitely. And then we've got lots of TV credits and Hammer films. And then John Kearney rounds out the main cast, and he played Elias.
It's a good cast. So, they are really good.
They are good, and there's a lot of nice banter, and there's some nice scenes. I think Dirk is obviously extremely charismatic in this film. I think he plays it mostly on like a charismatic level. But yeah, a cast is interesting. It'll be interesting to talk about performances later on, I think.
Yeah, I think there's definitely a caveat there with the casting. So moving into
almost forgot two very small roles. Christopher Lee as a German MP.
Yep.
Who follows Dirk into a dentist's office, and there's a classic dentist's chair scene where the dentist is pretending to do some dental work on someone, gets a drill out, etc. That's a trope. And
it is a bit.
Christopher Lee suspects them, and there's a scuffle, and then Dirk shoots him in the stomach with a little, like, I think it's like a 25, like a
nickel-plated revolver, isn't it?
Like a tiny little 25 caliber pistol, something like that. Yeah. Maybe a 32.
It's very cool. Cowboy-y almost, that scene, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a good one. And Lee's lines are predominantly in German, which he delivers very nicely. And of course, he was RAF liaison officer and RAF liaison officer with the SOE. So
it adds him having small roles in like 60s, 50s war movies, because he had a small role in the Cockleshell Heroes, didn't he, as well?
Yeah, he did. I wonder what he made of it. And then before we move on, we have a very young David McCallum.
Yeah.
Who is a seaman aboard the motor launch, who drops off Oxley's character and picks up the team at the end of the film. And that's his film debut. And he stumbles over his one line a little bit at the end.
Let him have another take. It's so
I know. But yeah, he's very young in this. He doesn't have a lot to do. He just stares into the middle distance at the beginning, and then he sort of ambles up and says it's time to go or something.
Talking of David, is it David McCallum? I'm getting that right, aren't I? Talking of him, I found some really interesting trivia about him the other day. So strolling through TikTok, and there's a music TikTok channel that I follow, and they do like samples. One of David McCallum's like guitar riffs on one of his songs was sampled by Snoop Dogg in the 90s.
David McCallum has a musical career. I did not know that.
It's Dr. Dre. So it's a Dr. Dre sample, but it's a David McCallum song. The Edge by David McCallum.
What? That's mad. That's an iconic riff too.
I know. That's an absolute nugget for you war movie fans out there. So if you listen to our History Rage episodes, we said that we've probably given loads of free trivia nuggets to pub quiz heads. And I think that's another amazing tie-break question there. How do you link David McCallum and Dr. Dre or Snoop Dogg? Only on Fighting on Film, people. Right, so moving on to the production of Ill Met by Moonlight. There's a fabulous restoration available to watch on ITVX and BritBox if you are a subscriber. It's amazing. The production. So it's based on the abduction of Heinrich Krepp in early 1944, and the script is based off the 1950 memoir of the same name by W. Stanley Moss. With any relation there, Matt? No?
Sadly not. I mean, it may be an unknowing relation, but
who knows?
Not that I know of. Yeah.
And with Emmerich Pressburger of obviously Powell and Pressburger fame, bought the rights to the book in the same year. The film finally went into production after a 6-year hiatus when after the success of the Battle of the River Plate in 1956, they signed a one-picture deal with the Rank Organisation. Their experience working on the film's production, however, did lead to the end of the Archer's produced films. It was a bit of a tumultuous time on this project. So the film, as I mentioned, directed by Emmerich Pressburger and Michael Powell, known for a matter of life and death, the life and death of Colonel Blimp, Battle of the River Plate, filmed in black and white rather than this division, unlike other Pressburger films, which I think is it's a shame because I think it would have added so much depth to the beautiful camera work. It's distributed by the Rank Organisation, and Powell and Pressburger blamed them for interfering with the film's casting and filming locations, and they didn't like the fact that Dirk Bogarde was cast in the lead. Obviously, he was a Rank actor at the time. He was known as the the darling of the Odeons, or the something like that. I can't remember the exact word, the exact phrase. And Powell said this of Dirk's casting from a passage taken from Dirk's autobiography. Powell wanted a flamboyant young murderer, lover, bandit, a tough Greek-speaking leader of men. Instead, I got a picture postcard hero in fancy dress. He would listen with attention to me while I told him what I wanted. Then he would give me about a quarter of it. In the end, it was, he decided, a mess. How cruel!
Yeah, that's unfair. That's unfair.
And then,
if you gave this any more than Dirk is giving it, it would be caricaturish. Surely.
Yeah, it's a shame, isn't it? And then Patrick Lee Fermer added this on Dirk's portrayal from the same book. Once again, after the fiasco of Elmet by Moonlight, Patrick Lee Fermer felt the film slipped away into cliche and could have stuck rigidly to the actual consternation of events. Dirk, resplendent for a while in the outfit of a Cretan chieftain, cut a dash, but it was a photograph of himself in a beret, battle dress top, and jodhpurs tucked into knee-length boots, which he kept as a memento of his career as action hero, his favourite still. Nice, but also not nice.
I from that I don't know what he thought of it.
It's difficult,
guess,
isn't it? Yeah.
It's interesting because you could have gone a very different route with this film, and I'm sure we'll talk about this in a moment. But Dirk does a more than charismatic enough job.
Dirk's doing what Dirk does.
Yeah.
But
he's working with material that I feel isn't top notch.
It's not fair material, I don't think. We'll get back to it because I know the route we're going down because we talked about it before we started. Due to the political situation on Crete at the time, the film was shot in the Alps Maritimes in the south of France and the Route du Jour, along with Pinewood Studios for interior shots. Fermer and Jean, who were on the original operation, did act as advisors on the film. Cinematography was by Christopher Chalice, who worked with Powell and Pressburger on the Battle of the River Plate and the elusive Pimpernel, among others. And the score was by Greek composer Mike Theodorakis. There you go. Whose works include the score for the Battle of Sejuska with Richard Burton, Zorba the Greek, and Serpico. It's one of my favourite films.
Nice. I do like the score. I think the score's fabulous.
It's got those Greek notes in there.
It's a really great little theme. There's lots of Phrygian scale running throughout the score, and it just sounds really nice. So it's good that they got someone so skilled and familiar with that type of music to do the score for it, I think.
Yes, it really does. It's great. And he himself is a prolific composer. And the budget was just over £212,000 in today's money. That would be just over $5 million. The film was described as a financial success, but I couldn't find a box office take. It was released in March 1957 in the UK and in July 58 in America, but it was called Night Ambush. And the retro review this week comes from the New York Times by Howard Thompson from the 25th of April 1958. It's quite a long one, but I think it gets its point across. Night Ambush, which opened yesterday, is a second-rate British adventure drama of World War II made by Powell and Pressburger, two men who emphatically should know better. Three reasons why are Stairway to Heaven, Black Narcissus, and The Red Shoes. It might be more to point to cite Pursuit of Graf Spee, a recent work by the writer-director-producer team, and one that at least took war seriously. The most curious and exacerbating aspect of the new picture, set on the Nazi-occupied island of Crete, is its archness and whimsicality. Almost from the opening scene, adapted from W. Stanley Moss's novel, The plot describes how two British intelligence scouts and some friendly natives kidnap a Nazi general and drag him across the mountains to wait for a boat. With a pretty good cast headed by Bogarde as the chief scout, Marius Goering as the enemy officer, most of the picture appears to have been shot on location with some craggy panoramas that would have been wonderful to see in colour. To put it squarely, this dawdlingly directed entry lacks genuine suspense, wartime urgency, and genuine humour, while straining frightfully hard for chuckles all the way. Powell and Pressburger may have aimed for a thriller, but they have casually mixed a flat wartime martini.
Well, that's done it for us, hasn't it? That's exactly what I was thinking about the film.
See you next week, folks.
Yeah, roll it out. See you next week. Damn.
I know.
Yeah, that's pretty much spot on. Yeah, they aim for a joviality within the script, which I just can't imagine.
I can't get behind it.
What was actually? I haven't read Ill Meant by Moonlight, the book, so I can't say whether any of that humor is also in the book. And I'm sure there is some humor, and they got on really well with the Cretans, and it was a close knit, operation. But there's a level of joviality and attempted humor, kitsch humor, which runs throughout this film, which undercuts any stakes and suspense.
There's a lot of it.
When that's what the film is built on. It's are they going to get away with the general that they've kidnapped? A, are they going to successfully kidnap him? And B, do they get away? And, there's moments in the film where you get a little bit of an idea of some of the genuine suspense they could have created. But it gets quickly undermined by other scenes where it's like, what?
And the pacing doesn't help.
Yeah.
No, exactly. And the pacing doesn't help because it rattles through so fast.
It does. It's the pacing of the film is good, but you're kind of not given a chance to breathe.
It's very quick
and appreciate the difficulty they're having in getting this general across the terrain, the mountains, and open ground of Crete.
It could have been rank organizations meddling according to Powell and Pressburger, but I feel like we needed more scenes of them trekking through the mountains, it being very difficult and arduous. I never felt like it was difficult or arduous really for them.
No, I mean,
they just seem to just have a lovely hike,
Yeah, some scenes of the Germans actually being within, distance of them
distance would have been good.
Yeah, would have added suspense. And again, I don't know how close the Germans got and how far ahead they were, but I believe
but in terms of a film, it needed something.
There were instances where they were close, and we're always saying that sometimes films can take a little bit too much artistic license and add things that they shouldn't.
Whereas this one doesn't take enough.
Sometimes
it might feel.
Yeah, exactly. You're left wanting just a little bit more. And I know there's a scene and an opportunity we'll talk about in a moment where they could have done something fairly spectacular and given the film a really oomph of an ending, but don't. But yeah.
Yeah, it's a few things that sort of rankle, don't they? But anyway, getting back to the production. So it's on with the one-word reviews. And we had some good ones. We had a nice, I think we had 40 or 50 entries this week.
You can join in with that at Fighting on Film on Twitter.
Yeah, please do. We usually put them out over the weekends before we record, because we record over the weekend. So do look out for them every week. So we have AD Bond goes with Professional. Paul Woodage from World War II TV goes with Ernest. David Current says Crete. Ken Reaney goes Poshos. Stephen Proctor goes Mountainous. Paul Hicks, Dirky. Barry Frank, Fantastic. Darren Skerritt goes Amateurs, and then he goes with Professionals. And Maureen Picard goes with Archers. And rounding it off, Sir Donald Pigg goes Audacious.
Yeah, there's some good ones there, I think.
Yeah, but a lot of people saying, "Oh, this is an absolute classic. Can't wait for you to get into it."
Yeah.
So I don't know if they're going to be disappointed. Sorry,
they
everyone.
Might. I mean, this was, I think, the second time I've seen this. I vaguely remember this from years ago. So I vaguely remember.
I always get it confused with They Who Dare.
Yes,
And
yeah.
I even got it so confused where I posted a picture of They You Dare saying we were reviewing Ill Met by Moonlight because they're very similar looking. They're
I'm
both,
sure everyone thought that was intentional, Rob. They thought that was a very funny joke.
Nope, it wasn't intentional at all. I think one of our followers actually lost it. I think he's lost in translation on Twitter. He pointed it out, and I was like, "Oh gosh, yeah, you're right, yeah." It's just how it goes sometimes.
I mean, I'll explain my thoughts on the film in final thoughts, I think, and I'll say
Yeah,
so
I'll get into it a bit more there.
I think now's the time to move into the alley tally.
It sure is.
It's time for Alley Tally on Fighting on Film.
Yeah, there's not much going on because there's not much going on action-wise, but it's not really about that, I know. It's a very simple plot of kidnap the chap, extract him. You've got Dirk and his SOE chums going around with M1928 Thompsons, but I think on the actual raid, I can never remember this weapon. I know Matt will know, but if you see pictures of the actual raiding party and the partisans that are with them, they've got this very rare submachine gun that looks a little bit like a Thompson. Could you tell the listeners what it is?
Yeah, so Rob messaged me on WhatsApp and said, "Yeah, I don't think they had Thompsons. I think they had something else that looks a bit like Thompsons." And I was like, "Oh, UD-42s, yeah."
Matt just knows, yeah.
Because United Defense M1942s were mostly used by SOE. So SOE got quite a few of them, and they dropped them to various cells and on various operations. And they're probably the most prolific user of UD-42s. They're really interesting guns. They are submachine guns. I believe they're 45 ACP, like a Thompson.
Right.
And they do have a front grip, but they have a classic conventional buttstock where you hold onto the buttstock rather than a rear pistol grip like the Thompson.
They're like someone's trying to draw a Thompson from memory, but not having seen one in like Thompson, 10 years.
It's the Thompson you have at home.
We've got Thompsons at home.
Yeah.
You are right. It makes sense. They're good stand-ins, though.
I can completely understand them not managing to get UD-42s.
No, they're very rare.
I mean, they are.
If they'd have shot in Crete, maybe they'd have got some. You know,
maybe.
Who knows?
Maybe there've been some hanging around. There's some revolvers, very briefly.
Yes, there are, as you mentioned earlier.
I think there's are they Webleys or Enfields? I'm not sure. I can't remember.
Maybe. But then I like the look of the partisans when you first see them. They look very partisan-y. They've got the bandoliers. They've got an odd mix of rifles. There are some number 4s in there. There are some Steyr. They look like Steyrs to me, really early, like 20s Steyr rifles.
I don't know.
Used by the Greek police. I can't remember.
Really? Okay.
Yeah, maybe. And there was some definite, like, obviously K98s and things like that, obviously. But that was nice because it showed that the SOE influence of delivering weapons had come through. I like that.
Well, a mix of battle dress and Cretan traditional wear as well.
You know, you've got the chaps with their wings on their battle dress. You've got like I can never remember the names of people from this film, like, because Dirk Bogarde he is so a presence in this movie. I forget everyone else. But people are wearing like civilian shirts underneath their BD. It's very relaxed. It's not stiff upper lip type
Sandy's
thing.
Very relaxed. He's got the like a check light shirt underneath, hasn't he?
I like it. It's really nice. And even down to the details of things like that made the partisans and the SOE feel like they'd been embedded for a while. They didn't feel superficial. Where you've got the chap
quite well.
Yeah, so the chap's going back on the boat when Sandy comes in, and he goes, "No, give me your boots. That's our tradition. Come on." And he doesn't want to give up his boots, and they do.
Yeah, so boots are in short supply.
Short supply, yes. They've got like supply issues and things like that. I really like that. And then obviously Dirk's costume. That's Ali.
Yeah.
And I think Sandy says to him, "I like your outfit," and Dirk goes, "I like them to think I'm sort of their Duke, a latter-day Lord Byron." And it's great. It's just he could pull that off.
I think Dirk would have been great to play Byron. Actually, that would have been.
Would have. Yeah,
quite a
been
good
great.
casting if they'd ever made a film about Warren. But yeah, he does look quite resplendent, doesn't he?
He does.
But he's
He
only
really
in it
does.
very short.
Very briefly, and
That
he's got
one
his
scene.
jodhpurs and his
Yeah.
sweater and all that.
Yeah, and the knife, and
I
yeah.
like it. And then finally, just the only thing that lets the movie down, and it's a 50s sort of war movie trope, I think, where the Germans just look okay. Yeah, they've got the field growl sort of type, or the more tropical type uniform on.
Yeah.
But there's nothing to
Sand
write
colour,
home about.
yeah.
It's all got mittens, belts, and things like that. And then they were going around in American half tracks and Bedford trucks. It's just tropey 50 stuff that we love.
Oh, was there a Betty? I missed the Betty.
Well, I think it was one Betty QL. It might have been Austin. I can't remember, but it was definitely a British truck.
Ooh, we haven't had an entry on Betty Watch for quite a while.
We haven't. No, Betty Watch had been dead for a while, so it was nice to see it. But yeah, apart from that, they really felt like a partisan band and
they looked the part, didn't they? It looked.
They did.
From the photographs, the very few photographs of the Cretan resistance and the SOE cell. I can. We can definitely agree that they looked the part.
Yeah, they did. They really did, and they looked dishevelled. They didn't look brand new either. At some of them, but no, it's decent enough, I think. Yeah, and that's about it, alley-wise. There isn't much going on.
Yeah.
There's the motor torpedo boat that they come in on.
That's kind of cool.
Back.
Yeah, kind of cool. I like that shot. That's one of my favorite shots of where they're approaching the island on the boat, or where Oxley's approaching the island on the boat.
It's nice.
And that is the moment I thought, oh, this would be great if it was in Technicolor.
Exactly, because it's the whole thing. Powell and Pressburger, I think they shoot their movies and they envision their movies to be in color. So it's such a shame this one didn't have it. It must have been ranked trying to save a few pounds.
Must have been,
surely. But anyway, have you got any more for the alley tally this week? Because it's quite.
I think we've covered everything. Yeah.
Yeah. There's no tanks. There's no.
There's the General's Mercedes.
General's Mercedes. That's very nice.
Which one of the Cretan lads recognizes by the sound of his engine.
You could say that boots are quite alley in this, because there's a lot of boots related stuff in the plot.
Yeah. Boots are a little plot device as well towards the end as well.
Yeah, they are. Nico, good old Nico. Right. So moving on to favourite scenes.
Hello there. Sorry to interrupt. I wanted to let you know that you can now join our supporting cast over on Patreon. As thanks for your support, you'll be able to help us pick films, submit questions for guests, have first pick on brand new and exclusive merch, and much more. Thank you for your support. Now back to the show. So in terms of favourite scenes, for me, I think the one that stands out is the fog scene. They're on the run. And it's the scene that gives you the most impression of jeopardy and suspense within the whole escape element of the film, the last two acts. And it kind of underlines what could have been done with the film a little bit, I think. Because even that scene doesn't really ramp up the tension as much as it could. And even then, it's there's a scene later on where the general's been put on a horse because he's pretending to be injured. Sorry, a donkey. And there's a bit of tension where they think, oh, we're being followed. Like one of the Cretan resistance members says, like, Philadelphia, we're being followed. I think we're being followed. Yes. And they kind of like take up positions. I think Dirk draws his revolver, and that's the scene where you see the revolvers.
Yes. They're ready for a scrap at that point, aren't they?
Yeah. And you think, oh, okay, a bit of jeopardy. And then a couple of goats come down the track, and it's another moment of joviality.
Playing it off for comedy, really. Yeah. And you could have done that without playing it for laughs.
But you have to have some sequences which are serious and hold the weight.
Yeah.
That you can juxtapose that comedic element against. But because it's all fairly lighthearted, the whole escape is relatively lighthearted. The hardship doesn't feel particularly real.
Yeah, they take their battle dress jackets off, and you see them in their shirt sleeves, but they don't look like they've been walking for 18 days.
No,
I don't feel that. It gets a little bit muddled, I think. And I know how you feel. Yeah, but you're right about the mist. They could have done more there. And obviously, I know that I don't know if whether the Germans pursued them through these mountains as like the movie doesn't suggests. So
Yeah.
obviously it's my ignorance of not knowing enough about the operation, but um, could have done a bit more, a little bit, maybe a bit more artistic license. I never felt
Yeah.
they were in that much danger. Even the elements could have been a danger to them, and didn't feel like that came in enough.
Yeah. I mean,
Like,
there are films that do similar sequences like that,
mm,
where people are being pursued. Here was a Telemark,
yeah,
the Guns of Navarone,
yeah,
have pursuit scenes where you genuinely feel like they are being pursued
mm,
and there's real jeopardy. And I think with this film, it would have benefited
yeah. I think
considerably
it would have done.
from having a
Yeah,
little bit more of serious tension in
and
places.
it's maybe rank not letting Dirk maybe get that shoveled. Perhaps it could be in his contract that he's got to look as kempt as he can be at any one given time.
Perhaps so. Who knows?
Yeah,
Yeah.
even they could have
What about
grown
you? Have you got
beards
a favorite
stuff.
scene?
Yeah, it's more of a favorite sequence. I think the capture of Cretan is really well done.
Mm.
The whole setting up, being at the crossroads, learning the movements of the car, trusting the partisans to know the movements enough. When they've captured the general and they're in the car,
Yeah.
they're driving through the streets and the hills, and it's this whole fear and them being like, you got Dirk chain smoking. I think it's a really nice little detail that you do is very noticeable. He's very, very anxious, and then they get through that sea of Germans. That's a beautiful shot.
Mm.
They could be found any moment. That's really great. And then the fear goes to jubilation once they get through that big checkpoint, and you get some really great dialogue where the comedic tension does work. The comedy element does work because they're happy they've done the job. It's like
Yeah.
long live the Cretans, up the rebels. And then after that is where my final thoughts come in. Really, the first half hour of this movie is really great. The pacing and the tension and the fear is good. Capturing this big German
Yeah.
general, really great. And then it delves into a generic sort of cat and mouse chase. And I've got it in my notes where we see a lot of the mouse, but very little of the cat.
Yeah. That's very true.
And that it just never feel like they were in true danger right until the end. And obviously, if
Yeah.
the operation is like that, and that's great. But as a movie, I just want a little bit more. Like I feel like Nico's betrayal could come in. The general could have been working on that the whole way through.
Yeah.
Could have been sort of chipping away at Nico's morality. Could have been a bit more there because I know Powell and Pressburger can do that because they did it with Matter of Life and Death. They did it with Life and Death of Colonel Blimp. It's just in this one they can't work out the tone whether it's serious like that review said. And I did read that review like a few days after I'd watched the film, so I'm not basing my opinion on something I've read beforehand. We do go into these movies blind, and whether
Yeah.
we've seen them or
I
not.
agree.
But I just felt, it gets it right. It tonally, it's all over the shop. It doesn't. It wants to make you laugh. It wants to make you fearful, but it can't grab one properly. And yeah, but money for jam is a great line, and I do like
It
that.
is, and there's some good lines, like the bit where they describe themselves as amateurs, and it circles back to that at the end where the general admits that
They
they
are
aren't amateurs, they're
professionals.
professionals. There's an element of him wanting to believe he's been captured by professionals.
Yeah, of course.
I
Yeah,
think,
and he's Goering doing a great job. He's really well
yeah,
cast in this.
yeah, he's a serious foil to some of the
Yeah,
charisma, some of the charisma of Dirk.
yeah, they play off each other quite well.
Hello, I'm Al Murray, and you're listening to Fighting on Film, the world's #1 war film podcast.
Moving into final thoughts, I suppose we should probably talk about the missed opportunity at the end. Again, might almost be a cost-cutting exercise, and Powell and Pressburger handle it quite nicely. But there's a sequence at the end of the film where the Germans have been chasing them, and a company of Germans have occupied the beach that they're going to exfil from, and they're expecting to meet the motor launch at. And they don't know what to do. They don't know how they're going to get through them. They can't fight through them.
Yep.
And eventually, spoilers, Nico leads them away very cleverly.
That's good tension. That's very good tension.
That's one of the best parts of the film. And it would have been even better, that whole sequence, if they'd shown the ambush that had been laid for these Germans that Nico leads away. But instead, we get a rather tasteful shot of a canyon with some reverberating gunfire sounds and echoes, intimating that there's an ambush going on. But we don't see any of it. Even if we'd just seen a little bit of it, I think that would have.
I think it would have been quite
helped.
empowering as well for the characters as well.
Yeah,
we've led to believe in this movie. Obviously, we know these partisans are incredibly brave, and they're going to lose a lot regardless of what they're doing. If they get captured, they're in trouble. If they do any attacking, they're in trouble because the reprisals are, absolutely horrible. And obviously that the reprisals were bad when the Crep was removed from the island, and then there was a not a very nice situation for the Cretans afterwards.
Yeah, there was a wave of reprisals and but yeah, I think it would have elevated the film a little bit. And I know Powell and Pressburger were more than capable of filming something like that.
Doing that, yeah, it just a little missed opportunity, perhaps, just for a little firefight.
Perhaps just a funding thing.
It might have been money. I mean, maybe it's just me at this point. I was a little bit, I wouldn't say bored, but I was like, come on, I want some action now. You need it.
I never felt like they weren't
in a 50s war film.
Yeah, I never felt like they weren't going to escape.
No, I never felt like they weren't going to get out. Yeah, I think that's what annoyed me.
It didn't create a genuine fear for me as a viewer.
No.
To believe that they weren't going to escape. And
I wanted to see Dirk fire that Thompson so fucking badly.
Oh, I know. Yeah, that would have been great. Yeah, that would have been great. Just popping up from behind a stone wall.
Please.
Letting off a mag.
Or, silently dispatching a sentry or something. Just something. Yeah. Like I wouldn't have... obviously, maybe Powell and Pressburger wanted this... They wanted to do a serious, as much as they could, recreation of events, fair play. Yeah. But I think for the audience, perhaps, I'm not saying that war movies can't be nuanced and have a lot to say. Look at The Cruel Sea in the same decade. But, this one just felt like it was a bit more boys' own in places.
Yeah, it just needed a little bit more. I mean, to round out things in my my thoughts, the characters are likable. It's beautifully shot.
Yes,
it would have been better in color,
much better.
But it's still beautifully shot. I do appreciate that it stayed close to the reality of the operation, in that there were no running battles and big action.
No, it was great. It's good that it's grounded, but then it's also not. It's very odd. Yeah.
Yes, it just needed a little more, and perhaps it would have been absolutely fine as it was. Without any of that action added, if it had been a little bit less jovial in places.
It's the tonal shift really quickly. So, and this is in my notes, so I've got to mention it. And maybe you'll have it in yours as well. But it's when they're waiting at the crossroads, and it's just before they do the capture, and they realise that Crep's coming, and there's that character, and he goes, "The General!" and he runs off to get ready. I'm like, that's like a sitcom line. That's like a comedy line. Yeah. It's so tonally off for me. It's really Keystone Cops. I didn't
mind a lot of the humour and those elements when we were getting to know the Cretans when Oxley arrived. Oxley's Moss, the character arrived. That worked well. But for it to continue in moments of jeopardy, I didn't think that worked as well. A little bit more tension would have been great.
It's got Powell and Pressburger humour where it doesn't need it.
Yeah, I think that's it. And I think it's a rare depiction of the war in the Mediterranean Aegean.
Yes.
And that's a positive. But it really made me think. It really made me want to see Anthony Quayle's book about Albania and the SOE.
Yeah.
8 hours from London or England.
Got that on my shelf. Need to read it.
Adapted. I think. It just needed a little something more for me, and I can understand that people enjoy it as one of those Sunday afternoon
classic
romp classic
50s era
movies.
British films.
Yeah. But I don't think it does the operation the justice that it could have done, because a lot of civilians got killed in reprisal.
Yeah.
Which there's no mention of that after the end of the film either.
No, there's
I
not.
don't believe.
And of course, there isn't with most of these movies, really.
No. But you'd be forgiven for just thinking that this was a men on a mission made up operation.
Yeah, you might think that. Yeah.
Whereas, unlike Guns and Navarone, this actually did happen.
Yes.
And was real. It was a real operation, which is kind of counterintuitive. It's odd, isn't it?
It's a bit. And I think as well, learning about how Dirk was treated really pissed me off a bit, because I'm like, who else do you get in the late 50s? David Niven, he's getting a bit too old. Even
David
then,
Niven, perhaps. Yeah.
Stanley Baker, too tough, maybe. Michael Caine's not come online yet, really. In that era.
Todd.
Maybe Richard Todd. Maybe been a bit typecast by then.
Yeah, Todd wouldn't. I don't think Todd would have had the flamboyance for it.
No, Dirk brings what only Dirk can bring to this film.
Yeah,
and I
Todd's
understand
got the
why
charisma and the commanding presence, but I don't think he'd bring the flamboyance that Dirk could bring to the role. And it seems like the role needed a little bit of flamboyance.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, it feels like that.
Little flourish.
Just rankled with me after learning all that. I was like, that's not fair.
Yeah,
he does a really good job in this, and I know it did rankle with him. It annoyed him at the time because he felt like he'd given a good performance, and all the reviews came out and they were like, "Oh, this man's completely wrong." And he was like, "Hang on, I'm just doing what I've been told by my bosses."
Yeah,
exactly. It's not. I struggle to say whether I'd recommend it, but if you haven't seen it and you need to and adding it to your list of war movies you haven't seen, it please do. But it's not one that stuck with me for weeks after. It's
within
that
the context
kind of movie
of British 50s war movies. I think it's important because it's a depiction of the war in the Mediterranean and the Aegean,
of course,
on Crete, and that's very rare. So in that regard, I think it's worth taking a look at. It's an interesting one. It definitely is an interesting one.
Yeah, and
there we go.
Exactly, and I think it's worth watching for the restoration alone because it's beautiful. If you've got the TV and the means for it, it's great.
Beautifully shot,
of course. And there is I must remember while we're still on air, there is a good documentary about the operation, about the men who did it, having a reunion in the 70s called Reunion of Enemies. You can find it on YouTube. It's a Greek production. And there was also on World War II TV, Kyle Glover did a presentation about this very operation. So please go and over to those and find those. Fans of history here, I'm sure you'll history rage. Fans of history rage as well. Go and see what Kyle Glover does in his day-to-day as well. So there you go. That was Ill Met by Moonlight, another Patreon pick for you. And we love the picks that you're choosing. I think you're knocking out the park, guys. So please, if you want to get involved, please do so.
It definitely helps support the show. And there's other perks on there as well. So definitely do check it out.
Please do. And we will catch you next week. And as always, you can catch the back catalogue of the show on fightingonfilm.com. And we'll catch you next week. Have a good one, guys.
Now even more searchable.
Yes.
Thanks for listening, guys. Bye.
Bye-bye.